We're a group of Gen Xers learning about our ADHD and neurodiversity later in life. Join us as we discuss interesting clips we find online and how they relate to our own life experiences. Welcome to This Is How My Brain Works.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of This Is How My Brain Works. I am Krista, and I am joined today by my other co-collaborators, Sarah, Michael, and, Rudy. Did we just say Rudy or Jason? We just talked about it. What are we going by, Rudy? Rudy. So I was, doing as I do and going through a little TikTok, a little Instagram today. And one of the things that I have been really confused by, I guess, in this journey that we've been on is, we sort of always taught that if you're neurodivergent, autism, anywhere in that world, that maybe you're not making eye contact and you're not great with people. Like there's this idea around that. And yet so many creative people I know are now sort of coming out and realizing that we might have something happening, and including everybody here. And so, but it always just, I was like, but that's not the idea, I think, that we've had of what autism or what ADHD or whatever, whatever sensory integration disorder. It's not our idea of what it looks like. So when I found this today, I was absolutely floored by it. And so I'm going to let you guys, before we start, I'm going to say this is Lindsey and Mackereth, and I may not be saying that right. And she's got a company called The Method Creative. It looks like she's written a book called Introducing Neurocomplexity, which I love this term, neurocomplexity. And her Instagram is at method.creative.mpls. And all of that will be below the video for our viewers. So here, I'm going to share my screen.
So some people don't get identified as autistic until they're adults because their special interest happens to be people. So their interest is figuring out how people work, why they do the things they do, and they spend a lot of time researching, watching, taking notes, figuring out, cracking the code of this humanness. And first and foremost, that is an indicator that there is some confusion to begin with if we're spending that much time trying to figure something out. But this is a pro-social behavior, so it doesn't get flagged as neurodivergent. It's looked at as other different types of things. And so when this happens, people grow into adults and they start wondering, well, if I know so much about people, why does it feel so awkward to be around them? Why do I feel so different? And that there is the autism.
Hit me.
Hit you?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. That's yeah. I hate you now.
Because you have to factor this into everything you've ever known.
Yeah.
It hit me too. I think that we are, those of us who are actors, especially, it's like we are, or performers or in that filmmakers, we study the human condition. It's what we do. It's like that's what you do. And I have such an intuition, what I've always considered to be an intuition of people's behavior, where they are, understanding who they are, understanding what it is. And yet I've always felt like I'm an outsider looking in. 100%.
That intuition comment really strikes home. Like, I've actually been told that I don't know what people's intentions are, that I need to stop doing that so much. And compared to, oh gosh, I'm so bad at conflating Jane Austen and Emily Bronte and Charlotte Bronte. But I think it's Jane Austen. She has a character, sorry, I can't even remember, who does this, where she like just basically assumes the intentions of everybody around her all the time. And everyone's like, stop doing that. But it's hard, Krista, for me especially, because I do it and then I get proven right. and I'll say something very weird, like where everyone else is like, no, I don't see that in that person, and blah, blah, blah. And then fast forward, it's exactly that person, and they come out and say it, or it becomes clear. I've also been told, did I say this on our episode last time? I'm a human lie detector. To the point that it's annoying.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. What about you? You're both actors. You both are I mean, what did you see yourself in that at all? I mean, because I don't think it has to be about autism. I think it's sort of in that's why I love that word, neurocomplexity.
Well, I'm learning, boy, there really is some overlap with some things here. And I think that being perceptive and intuitive is something that I always felt that I had. And I, studying people it was always, I think, fascinating and an interest for me. But I do really feel like, because I knew at an early age that that my brain probably worked a little differently. I did study people in terms of like, what is this thing, and how should I act so I don't get judged or criticized or blamed for something because I only heard half of what that person was saying, or because I am not quite sure what we're doing here. So I have to observe for a little while before engaging. When my mom used to drop me off let's say at a play date or a babysitter, something like that, I was very shy initially, and it took a little while for me to kind of like assess the environment and situation, and then I would totally fully engage. And so I knew I had some sensitivities, but I think there's like this, observing something initially without just going into it. I don't know. I mean, it's I'm kind of like struggling here because like there's wisdom in that, there's survival mode in that, there's risk aversion in that, but then there's also like potential for masking. Very much, I'm going to figure out how to act in this situation so I can be liked or so I can fit in.
So this creator says something. She's got another video, if you go look at her stuff, that she talks about masking. That she flips the she flips the script a little bit on the idea of masking, where she says, "I now ask myself before I go into any social situation, how much do they deserve to know the real me?" And if it's someone who's really close to her or whatever, then she knows that she can mask the neuro complexities, I guess, a little bit. She can just be herself. But if there's people that, she doesn't feel like they deserve to really know that about her, she masks more. And I find that really interesting because, again, I will say again and again and again until the day I die, every single human masks. And we shouldn't be talking about it as if it's like some sort of thing that we're all doing that is good, bad, right, wrong, whatever. Every person masks. It's called polite society. So, and fitting in, everyone doesn't. But I do think that there is that idea of who are the people who get to know me best and who are the people who don't really get that privilege.
I'm wondering, because, I mean, being diagnosed also along with the ADHD as a highly sensitive person, HSP, and we wear it on our sleeve, and so I don't really know that I'm fooling anyone with how I'm feeling, but I do relate to, Krista, what you're saying as far as I do control how much I let someone in, like how vulnerable am I going to be with this person, and if I don't feel like I can trust them, then it's very surfacey. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I've been at work. I mean, I have a very diverse, it's a very diverse workforce, city and county of Denver. I'm just gonna say, right? We all know it's Parks and Rec. These people I've worked very closely with for 2 years, day in and day out. We spend the first hour talking. And there's so much information that could have come out that I would not in this. And these are people I go out to dinner with, or, I have a drink with, but there are a lot of things that I just still will not divulge because I have watched others, and as I've sort of set myself at a place where I'm like, okay, it's enough right now. They know who I am in the workplace, and it's great. I don't have to divulge anything else. I'm just not going to do it. I mean, I won't get into it, but there's been times where things have come up, but I just know not to, because I don't know how they'd react and then think of me differently. Like, would it change their perception of me? And that's the masking part, right? Would it change the perception of me and who I am to them if I revealed X, Y, or Z, right? Would it change the way they interact with me? And it's any situation. I think we as human beings do this. We sort of gauge the situation and see what kind of person or people on the other side, who are they? Who are they? And I think we do like to be, because we're people pleasers, we need to know the situation, right? We need to know what their reaction might be, or what kind, we need to feel that situation out before we divulge things. Because we don't want to disappoint. That's from my perspective. Like, we want to, that first impression, we want to be great. We don't want to have any sort of issues come up, or, if I say this, would they be, will that kill the relationship? Should I just give, these points, or should I divulge these, bits of information about myself and keep the others? We just don't know that. We have to play the room. I mean, we talked about it last week, the masking and the people pleasing, and, really struggling in big groups, because there's so many people to figure out in a big group, right?
So Krista, this like just hearing kind of like these opening comments here, and going back to the clip.
I want to hear what Sarah has to say.
Oh,
'cause
I'm
I think
sorry,
she's
Sarah.
gonna- I think she's going to do that.
I apologize.
for
Go
you.
ahead.
Uh-oh, you're mute.
I have a different way of doing this now. As I've gotten older and I've identified that, what I would like to call, in some instances, unnecessary people pleasing, I've got two things. One, I don't do that anymore. I don't mask. I don't change who I am. I think everyone is deserving to know who I am if they're interested. If they're not, I don't need to keep going. The only place I now mask is, or more like masking, is when I think that the information or the way that I'm communicating is overwhelming or might harm the other person for themselves. So like, let's say I walk into a room and my kids are super tired and had a really rough day. I'm not going to tell them all about the great things that happen with the podcast or what have you. But aside from that, I've really made, and I might be wrong on this. In fact, it's probably why people are like, you're so immature. You don't know where the boundaries are and you're not reading the room, so to speak. But I really have purposely tried to stop doing that and just be my authentic self. And if it doesn't land and the person decides not to be my friend, I'd rather find that out sooner than later. And maybe I'm wrong on this. Like, I know that I can be a lot, and that's where I try to recognize that maybe someone is triggered by something I've said, and that I think is different than masking who I am so that they will like me.
You know what it is, and we talked about it last week, is you ladies in particular are direct. You are very direct. And that is, like we talked about last week, for some people, that's like, oh my goodness, what? But I mean, that's how my wife is too. She's very direct. And sometimes, I mean, she just says it like it is. She doesn't, she's not she doesn't mind or care what the other person is going to think or people. She says it.
I
And
do
she's
care what they're
direct.
going to feel. So like, that's the distinction. Like if they're, here's a great story. I don't know if I told you about this one. I was at the dog park and my dog, Mark, is a humper. And he humps until the other dog sort of either tells him off or he gets sick of it. But if I try to break it up, he's going to try to get back to that dog and hump some. Like it makes his desire to do it even greater. So the people that I know, like there's people who are like, yeah, whatever. But so there was one guy whose dog, my dog was humping, and so ridiculous. So I basically was like, he pulls my dog off and I was like, oh, do you need me to pull my dog? Does it bother you that my dog is doing this? I can pull him off for you. And he's like, oh no, it doesn't bother me, but it bothers other people. So I just do it. And I was like, okay. I don't know that it bothers anybody right now. So like, do you want me to, if my dog, the more that I try to stop my dog, the more he's going to go for your dog. So if he does it again, do you want me to, get him off? And he's like, oh, no, it doesn't bother me, but it's just unseemly. And I was like, it's a dog. It's not like I whipped out my stuff and was like it's not, anyway, it's this, that's the stuff I try to like, I was like, F it. I'm not going to worry about your weird propriety thoughts on my dog humping your dog.
No, he's worried about how he looks
Yeah.
and how his dog looks to
Right.
other people.
Right.
He's worried about how
Yes,
he
absolutely.
doesn't want to look like his dog is allowing this.
Emasculated by my dog.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about all of that is like I know I mask. I've spent years perfecting masking. I've worked super hard on the masking because I have goals, especially in my professional life, that will not be attained if I just unfurl who I am. I have to I write emails and then take chunks of them for later so that I can give information at slower paces. I
don't know that that's masking though.
A bit, because literally if it were me, no, they'd get all of me all at once and we'd solve it. And that doesn't happen.
So but you're trying to be effective. That's that thing like, no.
But I think that's still masking. Still not me being me. It's just that there's a goal, but
no, because I think still kept every part of that email and sent it eventually. Like it's not
necessarily.
Oh, okay. Not
necessarily, because information changes, things change, but I think the idea though is that I have learned how to not be too much for people. I have and I don't always do well at it still to this day. When people coach with me, I tell them straight out, at least now I do, that I am who I am. And if it's not a good fit, that's the way that goes, but I've spent a lot of time, trying to make myself, I tell people up front, I'm like a fungus. You may not like me at first, but I'll grow on you because I know, like I've worked this system. But I think the thing that was so interesting to me about that clip was just the idea that I have spent a massive amount of time fascinated by humans and humanity and the way we react to things and noticing the little quirks. I know there's, when you're a child of divorce and some upheaval in your early life, I think you get used to figuring out where you can be small, where you need to be ignored, where you have to show up, where you do that piece of the puzzle. Not like my parents had a highly traumatic divorce either, but I just think that you learn how to navigate really complex situations with your family, and I just thought it was sort of that. And now I'm looking at things and going, because I have always felt that you could put me in the center of a room, in the center of a party, and have people do all the appropriate stuff. Hey, Krista, how are you? All the stuff. and I would still feel like it was a bit of an out of body experience, that I didn't quite understand it the way other people did, enjoy it the way other people did, were included in quite the same way other people were. And I just thought it was my, my own damn self, sort of my own faults, my own things. And now I'm looking at it going like, maybe that's just how my brain works.
Just so I'm clear on like the special interest in people, and what was her realization, or what did she decide from this realization?
I think it's the idea that for some of us, people are part of our hyper focus. That there's an idea that if you're autistic, that you want to be by yourself, or that you don't want to have relationships, or relationships are hard. But then when you look at it, there's an entire, one of the other clips I almost brought in was a CBS Good Morning show, which I'll bring in another time, that there's an entire show that's about to go to Broadway about what it's like to be autistic. And they have all autistic kids playing all of the roles. And none of them have trouble with eye contact, talking with people, giving a hug. And so there's this group of people who are still, neurocomplex, who this was our passion. People were our passion, are our passion. And so that doesn't make us any less neurocomplex just because we don't fit into the box of what people have decided autism looks like.
I'm
I think
curious.
that was my aha moment.
I think that's part of the reason, at least what I'm observing, is while there still is the autism diagnosis, the OCD diagnosis, the ADHD diagnosis, and so on, really the neurodiversity is this umbrella because there isn't one just imprint of one thing. I mean,
Right.
there are so many things that can overlap, and it's all individual, and things can kind of present differently. Like, so what I'm getting, like now, is the stereotype, or where someone who has autism, like eye contact is just too intense of a human interaction? Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah, they don't like it. They avoid it. They practice it often. But I think that's the autism. That's one certain flavor, so to speak, of autism. That doesn't cover an umbrella. Just like some folks with autism are nonverbal, some are highly verbal, some are, it's like you said, it's sort of a smorgasbord of neuro complexities.
Right.
All of
Right.
this is. But
Well,
I
that
think
neurocomplex.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
love
to
that
your
term.
point, that neurocomplexity term, it is very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Sarah, what were you gonna say?
I think it's interesting that it's 3 women right now in our very small sample saying that their hyperfocus or special interest is humanity. Like, neither of you guys do I see kind of resonating with this. So I'm curious, would you consider yourself someone who is hyper-focused on people?
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, I think Jason is for sure.
Tell
You
me
know
about it.
what's so interesting? How often do I sit at a restaurant and observe another table? And I know the whole relationship, right? I'm saying,
Yeah.
oh, he's the father. That's gotta be the stepmother. And then this is the son, and they're arguing about, you hear 1 or 2 bits, and then you know the whole story. And I
Yeah.
remember a game we would play, go to the airport, see people come off a plane, and try and guess where they just landed, where they just came in from. And just, you kind of start observing. And then finally, after about half the plane, you're like, hey, where did you guys come in from? And they're like this, we just got in from New Orleans or something, and you're like, I knew it. It was a Southern, I'm really observant of other people. Like, I think how often I know some of the tendencies of my neighbors. They always sit outside at night and light candles. I don't know their names. Across the, I'm always observing the people around me. When I go to a store, I'm like, oh, she totally forgot something. I just saw her come all the way down to the vegetables. Now she's got to go all the way back. That must be frustrating. Like, I'm thinking of all the things with all the people. I know their situation. It may not be spot on, but I'm making things up in my head. It's just part. I love observing people and getting bits of information and finding out things and then putting those pieces together, especially people who you like, maybe an employee or a coworker that you're just starting to work with, like a new employee comes in or something, you just start, and over time, that relationship, you learn things about it, just not how you interact with one another, but that person and what they're doing and how they do things. And I mean, I do it. I mean, just driving down the street, you look at someone and, oh, he's got to go pick up something at the auto parts. I bet that's his car right down here. Like, I'm making stories up. And I think a lot of it has to do maybe with protection,
Sure.
Just sort of, I don't know. It's maybe a shield at times, especially when you're not, when I'm, thinking about the three people next door,
Right.
who are eating dinner. But when I get into a relationship, it's definitely a small shield, just kind of feel that all out.
I think that's where I was going with
I love serving people.
That's where I was going with it a little bit, Rudy, as far as like my interest in people. And it was like, I would, overhearing conversation. My wife used to she gives me grief about, like, I'll overhear a conversation and I'll be like, da 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 da. And like, you didn't just hear it. And she calls me, she goes, "What, Mimi?" She calls, because her grandmother used to like to listen in on conversations. But I mean, there are so many things, I mean, with the ADHD brain that you like just kind of key in on. And it is interesting to me to try to figure out. I think you mentioned this a little bit, Rudy, as far as like, there's almost a puzzle in there to figure out. And I think that's food for the ADHD brain, that's like, we like to puzzle on it and think about that type of situation. And then also, my coping mechanism when I overdid the class clown thing. I was like, oh, I can get attention trying to make people laugh, or I can get attention trying to be funny. So figuring out how to make certain people laugh. And so you're really zeroed in on the type of person they are and what's going to get them, and how you can kind of finesse them sort of. And then when you get them, you get that response, you're like, I got it.
Have you played Cards for Humanity?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So basically
with my in-laws, which was not very fun.
No, yeah. But we'll play with, like, a new boyfriend will come around, or, with my kids' friends. And usually, we'll play with anybody. 7 years old, not too young. If you can read, no, just kidding. Anyhow, it gets to the point where I will figure out the sense of humor, and I can almost win every round because I figured out who's going to be judging, what do they think is funny, and I will lose the first maybe few hands, and then once I get it, I'm like, win, and I'm not fun to play with anymore because
But I think people who are in our field, whether you did it, your whole life, or you're still doing it, or whatever, as far as actors, creatives, directors, visual artists of any kind, performance artists of any kind, I think that's our, we've spent a lot of time in the sandbox of humanity, of figuring it out. I mean, that's what you bring into every character you play, or every sketch you write, every screenplay you write. Like, it really is about humanity. And so, and I'm not saying that everybody who's an actor or a performance artist might want to check to see if they're also autistic, but I have this vision of myself, a younger version of myself, standing in the middle of a party, watching it all go around, and always feeling I wasn't ever quite involved. And that, I think, was what caught me at the end, is when she said, "That's the autism." Because, wow. And I was like, oh, right. And not in a bad way, even just in more of like starting to put the puzzles together my own life finally at 50 in some ways. And also, you know, also knowing my kid who has such a hard time saying that he has autism, even though he's, you know, in the neuro complex world. You know, I think we have to break out of this idea: is what does ADHD look like? What does autism look like? What do these things look like? And realize that it looks like all kinds of things.
Right.
And you know, that's all. That's what I would have to say.
That's a great clip. And
Well,
the fact that
thank
she was
you, man.
driving during that whole time.
Yeah, a little nerve-wracking, but but if you're ADHD, you probably understand how you can do that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank, let me get all the names right. It's all going to be down there, but Lindsey Mackereth from Method Creative. And I think she has a book called Introducing Neurocomplexity, or some sort of presentation. Found that on Instagram. Go check her out. And yeah, super fun today. Thanks so much. See you next time on This Is How My Brain Works.
If you like this episode of This Is How My Brain Works, please like, subscribe, and share. For more info on today's clip, the hosts, and our podcast, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening.